Ramos. So it's a complex learning circle because it's the part of the front line is learning, and in the middle line is learning, and in the hierarchy is learning. So everybody is trying to learn more, and how this goes to the families, to the real beneficiaries. How this have an impact there, because it looks like it's only on the person inside of in the organization, but how this really impact to the beneficiaries?
No, that's a really good question, because actually what really happens with having the frontline workers be central to any training is they're bringing in and going out with them and seeing the work and learning from the families. It's like the teachers, the best teachers in terms of any kind of training are the families themselves and the people who are working with them directly. So that's at the core of any kind of training that I want to do, is what are we learning, and what can we continue to learn, and how can we take the learning that we've gotten from the families and keep passing that on to other people within the organization and within other families. And so this is why when we talk about asking a family for permission to tell their story to another family, with changing names and so on, but well, you know, what are the things that you have learned? What are the strengths that you would recommend to somebody else to cope with when your child is out in the street and not coming home when you want him or her to, or when you go to the school and the school is very disrespectful to you and is not inviting you to come into a learning environment there. And so we're continuously looking for ways to pass that learning on, but within any training, that's at the core of it, because I'm coming in as a learner, I'm coming in as a facilitator. I also have some expertise, but everybody has expertise. And so how do we create a learning crucible, a learning space where the expertise of everybody can be brought forth? And for example, I remember one time when we were sharing, this must have been 8 or 9 years ago, our own experiences with family violence or couple and interpersonal violence. And we had 5 or 6 of the Hukoni staff and myself who were willing to share some of that in a reflecting team in front of the rest of the people in the workshop who were witnesses to that. And that was videotaped. And we talked about, well, is this a resource that could be used and also to show families, because there are a number of men talking within that.
That was 4 men talking about the violence.
The violence that they had experienced. And that's a theme that is still not brought into the discussion nearly enough about how do you give support and prevent violence when men are involved in it. And we constantly are focusing on working with women and children, and we don't look deeply, and this is an issue in the United States, you know, pro-feminist men's movements who are working with men to prevent violence are there, but are still very small organizations or a small part of work in psychology. And so in that particular situation, I became a member of the group. And part of what happens when you're working to create learning environments is you move out of becoming a member of the group, a facilitator, an expert, and you help other people to move in and out of that, rather than this idea that you're coming in as somebody who has a knowledge and you
have just to teach.
Yeah, because we are all teachers and we are all learners. It can get a little complicated because you need to keep being responsible for the overall dynamics of the training, and you need to be respectful of making sure that you're maintaining the time limits and the the feedback and evaluation and other things that are important part of that. And I remember in that particular time that we were doing the reflecting team, talking about our own experiences with violence, I asked somebody else to take, and I think it might have even been you, to take over as a facilitator and the timekeeper and the person who was like making sure that that process was working for everybody.
Yeah, and I can remember from that experience and the thing you're saying, that everybody has an expertise. So everybody has a life. Everybody has a life expertise in their life, and you teach us how to show our emotions and how valuable can be that for the families. And I remember that you said you can share part of your life, you can share part of your emotions, but it's in a different way in which families are sharing this. It's like you are sharing that you can go through emotions, you can go through the different, to a difficult part of life, but without disappearing, but without being uncontainable. So you are teaching the families that you can be really emotional without lose control. And this is something that you have to teach before yourself and then you share
Yeah.
that with us. So
Yeah, that whole question of how can you be transparent and open, but at the same time not let your story get in the way of the therapeutic story of the family members that you're working with, and how can we be responsible for our own emotional reactions, but not expecting that to be a model necessarily for how somebody else does it, because everybody has their own way, and it's not like we want to send some message like you should do it like the way that I do it. But if we can show that we're all human, there's so many people that have worries about a psychologist or a therapist. Like I remember this young African-American man came into a session when I see families in my home back in Massachusetts, and he was 15, and he came in, he said, I think you're gonna like take things out of my head. You're gonna he was very worried that in some way I was going to be very intrusive into, and we have some of these worries about what is a psychologist or a therapist or somebody in that role. Are they going to judge us? Are they going to be intrusive? Are they going to be blaming? And this is something that I respect so deeply and admire so deeply about the work of Hakomi, because it is so based on the strengths, the resilience, the positive aspects of families and communities and of schools, and always trying to find those strengths and working from those. And so we need to let people that we're working with know that we're in this together. And we're also vulnerable, and that's part of what makes the power of relationship, in that we can have that back and forth and that connection.
So we'll keep together, Janine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much
No, thank you. Como siempre.